good old colony days, when we lived under the king, lived a miller and a weaver and a little tailor, three jolly rogues of Lynn, three jolly rogues of Lynn, three jolly rogues of Lynn, lived a miller and a weaver and a little tailor, three jolly rogues of Lynn. The miller, he stole corn, and the weaver, he stole yarn, but the little tailor, he stole broadcloth for to keep them three rogues warm, for to keep them three rogues warm, to keep them three rogues warm. The little tailor, he stole broadcloth for to keep them three rogues warm. The miller got drowned in his dam, and the weaver got hanged in his yarn, but the devil got his paws on the little tailor with the broadcloth under his arm, with the broadcloth under his arm, with the broadcloth under his arm. The devil got his paws on the little tailor with the broadcloth under his arm.
The Gilded Cage, from when we bought it, was in October of 1957.
56.
Sorry, you're right, 56. Oh well. And we had been married 6 months at the time, and we bought the Gilded Cage. And at that time, there were people that came in almost every night in the week with guitars and would play guitar and sing. And Sunday night was a formal round robin, and we started a Sunday afternoon informal round robin with people singing in the front room and in the back room. You always found people there with guitars and so on. In 1957, I became, at that time, became very good friends with Howard Yanks and Bob Siegel and Bobby Jarofsky. The four of us were really close buds. And one Sunday night, Bob and the three of them came in and they said to Ed, "Can Esther leave for a while?" And he said yes. And I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "Well, George Britton, Mike Marmel, and Joe Aronson started a folk music society. And they're having a meeting tonight in West Philadelphia in the building that is now WHYY. At that time,
International House.
It was International House. And they had rented space for this, and I can even tell you who was performing. It was Dick Weissman was performing. And the four of us went up there and we paid our money and became members that night. George Britton was elected president. Joe Aronson got in a fit of snit because he wasn't president, so he dropped out. That took care of him. And that night, the four of us were asked to be on the board by George Britton. So it was the second meeting of the organization. Dick Weissman was performing. He was doing his wonderful banjo things that he does. And that's when we joined, and that's when we became active. Now, it was shortly after that that George wanted us to do a series of concerts. We did a series of 4 concerts. Bob and I co-chaired, and the money from those 4 concerts enabled us to have the folk festival. That was the seed money from for the folk festival. A couple years later, but that's how we became involved, and we became
that's how you became involved.
That's how I became involved. Ed worked. Ed worked at the Cage and became involved when we had the festival. He was involved in the festival, in the food end of it.
From the first one.
Yeah.
I had the food concession with, would you believe, Rachel Aaron and Ellen Aaron, Tassie and Lee's daughters. And they were about 13 then, 13 or 14. And we did the food, and I didn't get involved really until we sold the Cage in 1969. And then I was able to get involved with the society.
But Ed was always really involved. I mean, involved as far as we had we had sings at the Cage that were Folksong Society get-togethers at the Gilded Cage. We always sold their tickets for them. We were always really on the fringe. The Gilded Cage was always like the fringe of the society, but yet I was the one who actually went to board meetings and became involved in everything, and it was because of my buddies, my pals.
When you bought the Gilded Cage, was it a coffee house at that time?
Yes. It was 8 months old when we bought it.
And it was a music type coffee house. It wasn't primarily.
Well, not as much as when we had it. There was an older couple that owned it, and they weren't really into folk music. But there's folk musicians who used to come in because it was a place to go. And then after we took it over, it became almost all the time.
I was a folk performer. So Ed and I were married exactly 1 week, came home from our honeymoon. He said, let's go to the Cage, and I grabbed my guitar. And at the time, I probably knew 6 chords. And I had a guitar that, at that time, we got a guitar as a wedding gift from Ed's brother and sister-in-law. So I had this beautiful new Martin, and walked into the Cage with my Martin. But up until then, I played a guitar that had a cowboy painted on the front of it. So, as long as I knew the key of A minor, could do my Yiddish songs for Hadassah, I made my $10, and that was the end of it. But it was that kind of thing. But the Gilded Cage became this folk music magnet, and everybody came in. I mean, because we had everybody in there. We had Peter, Paul, and Mary came in, and of course I said Cosby came in. Theodore Backel was there. Simon and Garfunkel.
Whenever they were in town, they would come over, not to perform, but they have coffee or onion soup.
And to meet their friends.
Isn't that where Arlo Guthrie got his start?
Well, no, Arlo Guthrie.
Folklore.
Right. Well, Arlo Guthrie was a different story. Arlo Guthrie was friends. His mother was friends with a woman that we knew. Last name was Chalfin.
Peggy Chalfin.
Peggy Chalfin. I think they went to school together. And so whenever they'd come in, Arlo was a kid, and they'd bring him to the Cage to hear me. And at that time, I was singing every Friday and Saturday night in the back room of the Cage. I did that for 11 years. So that's where I was.
13 years.
Stop it. And, so they brought him there. Well, one time Arlo, he was about 16 at the time, he came in alone. And he told me that he was going to go out to the Main Point and audition. And I told him not to. I said, just go home, get your father's manager, and tell him you're a Woody's boy and you're not going to audition, and they'll get you a job. And he said, well, what if I'm not any good? And then they won't hire you again. That's the bottom line. But he went out there anyway, and he did audition. But 2 weeks later, he was the headliner at the second fret. Harold Leventhal was his manager, and he used to always come into the Cage whenever he was in town, as did
Mississippi John Hurt.
Mississippi John
He used to come and sit in the back room during the week and play, jam with people.
He was great. He was a wonderful man. But there was a lot of the really greats that came in. And one of the reasons they came in is Manny Rubin from the second fret knew that if they came in and performed at the Gilded Cage on Sunday afternoon, he'd have a big crowd on Sunday night. So he'd send them in to be part of the round robin during the day, and that was, where it was at. But I think that the mecca for folk music at that time really was the Cage, and that the first time I met Mike Marmel, he was singing in the back room of the Cage, and he went on to become, one of the founders of the organization, as did Joe Aronson. I think the Gilded Cage was his home.
So essentially it was the founding of the Folksong Society, took place at the Cage?
I would think that the seeds were planted at the Cage. I would think that was the way it was, that the seeds were planted there, and then it went on there's a lot of people that are interested. Let's get together and, you know, hire a barn, make a show. You know, it's one of those things. The early board meetings took place at my house because, first of all, we didn't have a club rooms, and secondly, I wasn't about to spend money on a babysitter to go to a board meeting. So all the early board meetings were held around the corner on Manning Street.
What was the address?
2320.
2320 Manning. I'm just picturing what it was. George Goldstein and Kenny. God, they used to fight. I mean fight. I mean fist fight. And
What did they fight over?
Oh, you know, I always say that the board members of the organization all are at A, and they all want to get to D, and some go A, B, D, and some go A, C, D, and it's just a matter of style, because we all want to get to having a better organization and making sure that our members get good things and giving away a lot of money, and that's what our aim is. But because of that different style, you have the personalities that are going to fight. They fought over foolish things. They fought over, should we give this somebody $500 or $600? And then they'd have a fist fight. I mean, they would fight. It was wonderful. Those were very exciting days, because then we'd all make coffee and sit and talk. You know, it was nobody got mad, nobody got nuts. But those two would, I mean, they would really go at it. They
Why?
would. Oh, I think they're just personalities. They were both
very strong personalities.
Very strong screamers.
And they had their own way of doing things.
And Bob would yell, "Don't fight! Don't fight!" Howard Yanks would sit there like this. It was really funny. It was a good time.
And from there, the meetings, we rented a cellar meeting place at 22nd and Spruce in the corner. And we used to have our meetings down there, and that was like our office.
There?
No,
across
it's
the
a
street from
private
the
home.
church. Across the street from the
They
church.
had a big room downstairs, and they rented it to us. But
And we could hold meetings there, and we could, you know, really didn't have a desk or anything, but if any work had to be done, it could be done there.
you know, but mostly it was done in homes. Mostly
We used to do the newsletter mailings from
right here.
Esther would make a chocolate cake.
That's
and
it. And we would mail out the newsletter.
Jaime and Diane Snyder would come down, and their two kids, and Janet Hogel, and who else?
What happened to Janet Hogel?
I don't know. And
That's a name.
we'd sit around the table and paste the labels and
labels.
paste the stamps and staple the newsletter together.
And don't forget, that was before there were computers and before there was stamp machines, and we did all of it. And we did all of it, and we'd sing while we were doing it. We'd sing rounds, or we would, you know, it was. The society has changed a great deal. I mean, it used to be just a bunch of friends getting together, putting together an organization. And I think that the reason that we wanted to raise money was because we wanted, number one, to put local people to work. That was one of our aims.
Local performers.
Mm-hmm. Another aim was to make sure that we were able to fund some really good programs. Jackie Pack changed her entire way of making a living by going back to school and becoming a music therapist. And she was a performer. And then we gave her a grant. And she went to work in a couple of hospitals. And at that time, they didn't have music therapy. They didn't know what it was. And she opened that whole field with funding from the Folksong Society. Well, I've done the booth now 26 years. In that time, we figure roughly grossing $1.25 million. It started out where I didn't have a job at the festival. I just got tired of I was doing tickets, and I didn't want it. And Howard and Jeanette stepped in. She had just married Howard, and Jeanette Yanks stepped in as ticket chairman, and still is doing that job. And I had done promotion, I had done publicity, I had done, I didn't want to infringe on Ed was doing the food, and I didn't want to move in on his territory. So one day I went to at the board meeting, I said, you know, I think it would be fun if I could sell a t-shirt. We already had the logo.
From the posters.
Yeah. So they said, well, how many do you think you can sell? I don't know. Well, let's start with 1,000.
Now, which festival was this?
That was,
73?
well,
The first one that we moved up to the Paul Farm
That was
from down
70,
below.
71, 72.
all I know is that this year's my 27th festival.
That'd be 73, I guess.
We put them on sale Friday morning, and by 2 o'clock Friday, I was completely sold out. So the following year, I went back and I said, I want 4,000 shirts. So we put them on sale Friday morning, and by Saturday afternoon, I was sold out. So the following year, I added kazoos, and I said, I want 8,000 shirts. And 8,000 shirts, I had a few left, but not many. And then we start putting together a committee. At that time, I just had the kind of a booth that had a plastic top, and I also
A carnival, like a carnival booth.
yeah, and I also sold the records, and I sold everything, you know. And then I went into strings and picks. Oh my God! And I had a guitar studio, so I got everything, you know, through the guitar studio to sell up there. And slowly they built me the booth, and you know, but we
a nice two-story booth.
a nice
right?
big dry two-story booth. But they have told me that I have been, you know, I keep very careful records, and I think it grossed about $1.25 million to $1.5 million. I don't have the figures right here. And of that, you have to figure between 50 and 60% is profit. So that's not bad, considering that, you know, you say, well, you know, it's 26 years, but it's only one weekend. So it's 26 weekends, it's not 26 years. You know, I could just picture it in my living room over on Manning Street, and there was Dave Hadler sitting on the steps, and Bob Siegel sitting on the couch, and I'm running around serving iced tea or something, and Hadler saying, you know, they have a festival up in Newport. I don't know why we can't have one. And what was that guy's name?
Butterworth, John
Butterworth. John Butterworth had a cousin who knew Collie Wilson. And out he went took Bob with him, and they went out to see Collie and said, we'd like to have a folk festival out here. And Collie said, what fun. I think that would be great. And that's how we started our first folk festival. It's a very distinctive design, and I think Gene Shea was the one who designed it.
Designed the original logo?
Mm-hmm.
No, a friend of Gene's.
Well, it was Tassi's idea. She gave it to Gene. This is the way that I was told.
Yeah.
Okay, I was wrong.
Gene had a friend, an artist, that did that little thing at the bottom, that little round thing, not the register, but there's that
The
little...
one in the chin. There it is.
Anyway, that was the artist's signature.
We had the cage. We sold it in 1969, and at that time, acid rock came in very big. And all the coffee houses panicked and started to put rock bands in. And we said, no, we weren't going to panic. we weren't going to do it. And it was 67, 68. By 69, we decided to sell. But we didn't decide to sell for the music because I was still packing them in, and we were still having Sunday afternoon round robin singing and getting a huge crowd. We sold it because my daughter was getting at the age where we weren't spending enough time with her. She was 9 years old, and she needed parents that were going to be home at night. And that's why we sold it. It had nothing to do with almost anything else, because we were still making a living from the cage. Not a lot of money, but a living.
Well, when the sun rose up this morning, I was feeling mighty bad. My baby said good morning, and it made me mad because I'm evil. Evil-hearted me. Oh, I'm so doggone evil, evil as a gal can be. Well, he even cooked my breakfast, brought it to my bed, took a sip of coffee, throwed the cup at his head because I'm evil. Evil-hearted me.